This session was very powerful. We didn't realize how strong the energy was until we got outside. Bob describes the event in his book, Far Journeys. When we got into our cars parked outside some 20 feet from Booth 2, we found that the batteries were dead in all 3 cars. They jump-started quite easily as it was a summer night and stayed in charge afterwards. Cars parked on the other side, or 60 feet away, were unaffected. Thus we learned we had better not park too close to Booth 2 during certain experiments. This situation actually happened several times because we would simply forget to park far enough from Booth 2, only to find our car batteries dead upon leaving, as Bob stated in Far Journeys. Exactly why this took place and still does, we don't know. Because I am more than physical matter, I can perceive that which is greater than the physical world. Chapter 6. More than physical matter. My invisible helpers spent many sessions preparing me for our journeys into other dimensions. They taught avidly and worked endless hours of Earth time on my energy body. In order to move freely into other dimensions, my energies had to be clear, so that there was a lot of cleaning up to do. One day when I was driving to the Institute for my session, I had the feeling that something very special was about to happen. My energies were exceptionally high. Little did I know that I was about to launch upon my first major journey. Apparently, my helpers, in their master plan for me, had determined that on this day I would come to understand clearly that I was more than physical matter. It seemed they wanted to impress upon me that the material world in which we live is merely a reflection of the real world, as they termed it. They chose to put this point across by launching me on a very strange journey of reality distortion, so that I would indeed learn how abstract and unreal life in the physical realm is. And when I say they launched me on this spiritual, unusual journey, I mean just that. As I got hooked into my check unit, I was feeling such excitement and anticipation that I found it difficult to relax, until the soothing sounds of ocean waves came through my earphones. I mentally repeated the affirmation, and it wasn't long before I went into my level and moved through the thick state. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes I would get stuck in this state and simply fall sound asleep. This was always embarrassing, with Bob waiting patiently in his control room for something to happen. After a period of time he would say in a gentle voice, "Is anything happening?" As often as not I would reply groggily, "I don't think so," and continue sleeping. I rationalized by convincing myself that at these times I needed sleep more than anything else. Perhaps I did. Sleep, however, was not on the docket for this particular session. Suddenly I felt a great surge of energy, as if I were literally being launched into space. This incredible burst of energy left me breathless and speechless, and I was unable to report anything to Bob until my pace slowed. It seemed as if I was moving rapidly through a dark tunnel. Strangely, it also seemed as if I was standing still. It was a paradox of simultaneous feeling, movement, and non-movement. Then, just as suddenly as my launch had occurred, I was suspended in a space of absolute stillness and isolation. An eerie feeling came over me, and I knew then what it would be like to be the last person on earth. I desperately wanted to believe that my invisible helpers were with me, but they certainly didn't make themselves known. I seemed completely lost in an endless space. I experienced a sense of separation from all my earthly support systems. Those few moments of absolute isolation seemed like an eternity. Then I realized that my invisible helpers had guided me into this particular space and experience for a reason. They wanted me to become aware of my need for detachment from the earth energies. This space was like a cleansing center to prepare me to enter a very different dimension. At this moment I had a vivid memory of an experience I'd had one night while sleeping. I remembered moving out into the expansiveness and darkness of outer space. I felt called toward the unknown and to the stars beyond. But at the same time I was frightened, even petrified, because I was being drawn away from any familiar territory. Had this nighttime experience been a preparation designed by my invisible helpers for my present state of lonely separation from all I knew? As I was just beginning to resign myself to this new feeling of naked isolation, I suddenly experienced some kind of energy capsule starting to surround me. Like a protective shield, it replaced my feelings of abandonment with a sense of security. I realized that the unique pod had been formed around my energy body by my invisible helpers, both to protect and to prepare me for a higher octane transportation mode. Without it, I knew that I simply was not capable of the journey about to take place. A great surge of energy suddenly radiated within and around me. I could see that I was very much running on high octane and was ready for whatever was next. My invisible helpers did indeed have a sense of humor. Having found myself encircled by an energy space capsule, I began making voice contact with Bob back at the check unit. As I brought him up to date, a helmet with a 12 on it floated before my eyes and was placed on my head. I sensed that it was a symbolic gesture. As I described it to Bob, I heard a chuckle from the control room. I guess she was in that state called 12. We both realized it was an indication that I was in Focus 12 and was ready to helmet up for an important journey. By this time, my space capsule was becoming extremely cozy, and all my attention began to focus on my immediate surroundings. The next thing I knew, the energy changed. My capsule was changing direction. I looked out, and there it was, an incredible view of planet Earth from outer space. Suspended below me, it looked no bigger than my own space capsule. When we picked up speed and began moving toward that distant tiny ball known as planet Earth, light, dark, and radiant colors were shooting out from it in all directions. I realized at once that viewing it from another dimension as I was actually seeing the Earth's aura, or energy form. It seemed as if I was, in fact, seeing the spiritual body of the Earth. My helpers were clearly showing me that the Earth was indeed a living entity, that it, like me, is more than physical. At the same moment, I could see planets shining in the darkness beyond, and I remembered that the Earth is but a tiny atom in an immense system of bodies, each with its own spiritual body. As we continued moving closer to the Earth, the radiating colored lights surrounding it became more and more prominent, emanating in every direction. I wondered what my invisible helpers were going to do with me next, and assumed that they would drop me off on our way through the Earth's atmosphere. On our way through, however, took on literal meaning. We went right through the Earth's surface, the way a neutrino penetrates solid matter as though it didn't exist. I wondered if I had been transferred into some kind of subatomic particle, or if I was traveling on a ray of some type. The thought occurred to me that our etheric energy bodies probably consist of particles more subtle than any known atomic or subatomic particles that make up our physical plane. As we penetrated the Earth's surface, it became dark. Then we moved through levels of color like the spectrum of the rainbow. Next, we were in an area of molten lava. I sensed the outside of my capsule growing very hot, but I knew it was a secure cocoon around me. Much movement was now taking place on the outside of my capsule, but I was experiencing a strange sense of weightlessness, timelessness, and stillness within it.